My dad called at dawn and said, "Your mother died last night. She left this house to your brother, not you." I heard my sister laugh in the background. I didn't say a word. I just put the phone on speaker because Mom was sitting across from me holding her coffee. Then she reached for the phone and said one word. "My name is Ethan. I'm 31. I fix network infrastructure for a hospital system, which means when things break at 3 a.m., I'm the guy who drives in and stares at blinking lights until they blink correctly. I'm telling you this because it matters that I'm used to being awake at bad hours. It matters that when my mother knocked on my door at 11 p.m. on a Monday night, I was already up. She was standing on my porch with a rolling suitcase and a purse she was holding with both hands like someone might try to take it. She was wearing a cardigan I bought her 2 Christmases ago and sneakers that didn't match her outfit, which meant she'd dressed in the dark or she'd dressed in a hurry. Probably both. My wife Ramona came to the door behind me and didn't ask a single question. She just opened it wider. Helen, my mother, 63. The kind of woman who irons pillowcases and sends birthday cards that arrive exactly on time. Not early, not late, because she tracks postage delivery windows. She cried at my wedding but tried to hide it behind a napkin because she didn't want to make a scene. That's who she is. She doesn't make scenes. She endures them. But I need to tell you what she was like before all of this. When I was 9 and had pneumonia so bad I missed 3 weeks of school, she converted the living room into a fort with blankets and extension cords so I could watch movies from a nest she built around me on the couch. She brought me soup in a thermos because she said thermoses made soup taste like an adventure. She slept on the floor next to me for 5 nights, not because I asked, but because she couldn't sleep upstairs knowing I was coughing alone. That's the woman standing on my porch with mismatched sneakers. Hold on to that. I made her tea because I didn't know what else to do. Ramona took the suitcase to the guest room. Helen sat at the kitchen table, the same chair she always picks when she visits, the one closest to the window, and she held the mug with both hands even though the tea was too hot to drink. She does that when she's thinking. She holds heat. I sat across from her, and I waited because Helen talks when Helen is ready and not a second before. The kitchen clock ticked. Ramona came back and leaned against the counter. Outside, a dog barked somewhere. Normal sounds. The kind of sounds that don't know something terrible is about to happen in your kitchen. She sat at my kitchen table and she said, "Your father is going to call you tomorrow morning and tell you I'm dead." I want to tell you I handled that well. I didn't. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my brain couldn't file it anywhere. My mother is alive. She's sitting in my kitchen. She smells like the same lavender hand cream she's used for 20 years, and she just told me her husband is going to announce her death in the morning. I laughed, and then I stopped, because her face didn't change, and Ramona put her hand on the back of my chair and squeezed, and the kitchen got very quiet except for the refrigerator humming. Helen opened her purse. She pulled out a folder. Inside, her Real will, notarized 8 months ago. A sealed letter from her doctor confirming she was alive, competent, and afraid. Bank statements, property documents, and a prepaid Nokia phone she'd been hiding in a sewing kit for 4 months. 37 texts on that phone, all to me and Ramona, describing what Roy was planning. She'd built a prosecution case on a phone that cost $19. She also pulled out a notebook. Spiral-bound, blue cover. She handed it to me and said, "When he calls, write down exactly what he says. Word for word. And the time. Write down the time." I took the notebook. I didn't ask why. She'd already answered every question I would have asked, and the answers were in the folder, and the folder was on my kitchen table next to a bowl of fruit that Ramona buys every Monday. She'd been planning this for 6 months. 6 months of secret meetings with a lawyer in a strip mall office 20 minutes from town. A lawyer she found by asking the receptionist at her doctor's office for a recommendation and paying in cash so nothing showed on a joint bank statement. 6 months of the burner phone, texting me and Ramona from a Nokia she charged in the bathroom while Roy watched television downstairs. 6 months of building an exit file while cooking Roy's dinners and ironing his shirts and sleeping next to a man who was rehearsing how to announce her death. She told me later she'd lie awake at 2 a.m. listening to Roy snore and mentally inventory the folder. Will, check. Bank statements, check. Property deed copies, check. Proof of life affidavit, check. She kept a checklist in her head because writing one down was too risky. My mother ran a covert operation from a bathroom with a Nokia and a sewing kit, and she never once got caught. She started the day. She overheard Roy say to Wade on the back porch, "When she goes, that house is mine." She was in the kitchen. She was making iced tea. She heard it through the screen door. She finished making the iced tea. She brought it out to them and set it on the table and smiled. And then she went upstairs and called a lawyer from the bathroom with the fan running so Roy wouldn't hear her voice through the floor. Now let me tell you their story. What was happening on the other side of town while my mother was sitting at my table? My father, Roy, is 65. He ran an auto repair shop for 31 years. Ran. Past tense. Because the shop failed 2 years ago and he never told anyone. Every morning for 2 years, Roy got dressed in his work shirt, the one with Roy stitched on the pocket in blue thread, drove to the shop, which has been closed and padlocked since 2022, sat in the parking lot for 8 hours, and drove home. He ate lunch in his car. He listened to AM radio. He came home with grease on his hands sometimes. Grease he put there himself because the alternative was coming home with clean hands and answering questions. 2 years of pretending. 2 years of sitting in a parking lot outside a dead business eating gas station sandwiches alone. Helen found out 3 months ago when she drove past the shop on her way to a pharmacy and saw the padlock. She sat in her car in the pharmacy parking lot for a long time. She didn't say anything to Roy. She added it to the folder. Roy also took out a second mortgage on the house 18 months ago, forging Helen's signature. Not a good forgery. The kind of forgery someone does when they assume nobody will check, because nobody in this family checks, because I was the only one who checked, and they all assumed I was too soft to cause problems. He's 3 months behind on payments. The house, the one he was about to tell me Helen left to Wade, was weeks from foreclosure. Roy needed to sell it fast. But you can't sell a house you jointly own with a living wife who won't sign. So you make the wife dead. My brother Wade is 34. He's a paralegal at a small firm. He has access to notary stamps. He used that access to notarize a forged will, one that Roy wrote. That leaves the house entirely to Wade. Wade also arranged a home appraisal through a real estate contact. The house appraised at $340,000. Wade negotiated a 15% finder's fee for himself for lining up a buyer. A developer. Offer was $310,000, closing in 21 days. Wade had the contract drafted. He was 72 hours from closing on his living mother's home. My sister Dina is 28. I don't know what Dina is. She was promised $45,000 from the sale. She'd already told her husband Craig they were getting an inheritance. She'd already mentally spent it. Already paid off her car in her head, already picked the furniture she was going to buy. When Roy called me at 5:47 a.m., Dina was in the room. She laughed because she was $45,000 richer and all it cost was a phone call her brother would believe. Roy also did something else, something I didn't know about until later. 7 months before the phone call, he applied for a $250,000 life insurance policy on Helen, listing himself as sole beneficiary. The policy was approved. He was 3 days from filing a death claim. 3 days. The house was the play they told each other about. The insurance money was Roy's private play. Wade didn't know. Dina didn't know. Roy was running a con inside the con. And here's the part that matters for what comes next. Roy already submitted a fake death certificate application to the county clerk. It was sitting in a processing queue, 2 business days from being official. He'd used a doctor's letterhead he stole from a medical office where he used to do HVAC work before the shop. The county clerk who was expediting it, a guy named Paulson, was Wade's former college roommate. Favor for a friend. Helen anticipated the death certificate. 3 weeks before the phone call, she walked into the county health department, showed her ID, smiled at the receptionist, and filed a proof of life affidavit. When Roy's death certificate application arrived in the system, it was automatically flagged because a living person with the same SSN had already verified their existence. The certificate was never going to go through. Helen just wanted to see how far they'd go. So that's both stories. Mine, mother on my porch, folder on the table, notebook in my hand, coffee brewing. Theirs, forged will filed, death certificate submitted, insurance policy active, buyer lined up, $310,000 about to change hands. 2 stories running on parallel tracks. They collide at 5:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. The phone rang. I was sitting across from Helen. The notebook was open. A pen was next to it. Ramona was standing by the counter with her arms crossed. Helen was holding her coffee with both hands. She nodded once. I answered. My hand was steady. I don't know how. Something about having the notebook open, having the pen ready, made it feel like a task instead of a crisis. Like I was documenting someone else's emergency. Ethan. Roy's voice. He'd practiced this. I could tell because the pause was measured. Like he'd timed it in a mirror. Like he'd rehearsed the rhythm of grief the way an actor rehearses a monologue. Except actors know they're performing. Roy believed he was the hero of this. Your mother died last night. She passed in her sleep. I need you to come to the house. Then, quieter, like he was delivering the real payload under cover of the sad part. She left this house to your brother. It's in the will. Wade will handle the arrangements. In the background, Dina laughed. Not loud. A quick thing, like someone trying to hold it in and failing. Like someone who just remembered they're about to be $45,000 richer. I looked at Helen. She was watching me. Her coffee hadn't moved. I wrote in the notebook, Roy, 5:47 a.m. Died last night. Passed in her sleep. I put the phone on speaker. Helen set her coffee down. She reached across the table and took the phone from my hand. Gently, the way she does everything. Like the world might break if she moves too fast. She held it to her ear. She listened to Roy breathing. He was probably already thinking about what to say next, about the funeral arrangements he'd have to fake, about the timeline for filing the will. She said one word. When? Roy didn't answer. Not for 5 seconds. Not for 10. Because he couldn't remember which version he told which person. He told me she died last night. He told Wade she died this morning. He told Dina around midnight. He told Aunt Clara she died peacefully in her sleep. For stories. For timelines. And his wife, the dead woman, was asking him to pick one. The line went dead. He hung up. I sat there. Helen put the phone on the table next to the notebook and picked her coffee back up. Ramona exhaled for what felt like the first time in 10 minutes. And part of me wanted to scream, and part of me wanted to cry, and a very small part of me, the part I'm not proud of, wanted to call Roy back and ask him if he'd ever loved any of us. Because even now, even after all of it, some stupid corner of my brain was still looking for a version of my father who made sense. I didn't call Roy back. I didn't call anyone back. I sat at the kitchen table for about 20 minutes, and I stared at the notebook, and I wrote down everything I could remember about the call. Time. Words. Pauses. Dina's laugh. Helen told me what Roy had told the others, because she'd been tracking his lies for months on the Nokia. Wade got a different story. Dina got a different story. Aunt Clara got a different story. Ramona, who had been standing by the counter this whole time, being the calmest person in a room where someone was supposed to be dead, said, "Send the text." She said it like she was reminding me to take out the garbage. Like it was obvious. Like the only question was why I was still sitting there. I sent one group text. Every family member. Every contact. 38 people. Dad told me Mom died last night. He told Wade she died this morning. He told Dina midnight. He told Aunt Clara in her sleep. Mom is alive. She's sitting next to me. Here's a photo. I attached a photo of Helen at the kitchen table holding her coffee. Timestamp visible. Date visible. She's looking directly at the camera. She's not smiling. She's not crying. She just looks like a woman who's been awake for a long time and is very, very done. 43 responses in an hour. I couldn't keep up. My phone was vibrating so constantly that it migrated across the table from the vibration alone. Aunt Patricia called and just sobbed into the phone for 2 minutes without saying a word. Cousin Marcus sent a voice note that was mostly silence, and then, what the actual? And then more silence. Helen's friend Beverly, who's known her for 40 years and was already planning what to wear to the funeral, called Helen directly. I could hear Beverly screaming from across the kitchen. Happy screaming. The kind of screaming that sounds like crying and is. Roy's phone went straight to voicemail. Wade texted me once. You need to calm down. 3 words. That's what he sent. His mother is alive. His forged will is exposed. His notary fraud is about to surface. And his response is, you need to calm down. I showed it to Helen. She looked at it the way you look at a stain on a shirt you were about to throw away anyway. Dina blocked everyone. All of us. Every number. Gone in about 4 minutes. But then the family started doing something I didn't expect. They started forwarding things. Uncle Gene forwarded a text where Roy had asked him to confirm the story if anyone asks. Cousin Andrea forwarded a voicemail where Roy said, "Don't call Helen's phone. I already disconnected it." Aunt Patricia forwarded an email from Wade with the appraiser's contact info and a note that said, "Don't mention this to Ethan." Roy's sister Clara, his own blood, responded to the group text before anyone else. She wrote, "I knew. I told him not to. He didn't listen. I'm sorry, Helen." 42 family members watched Roy's own sister confirm the conspiracy. Then 3 more voicemails arrived. Roy had left them overnight, each with a different death timeline, each with the same measured grief voice, each proving that the man couldn't keep his own lie straight across 4 phone calls. 7 separate pieces of evidence arrived in the group chat within 90 minutes, all from different people, all confirming that this wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a conspiracy, built by my father, co-signed by my brother, funded by my sister's greed, and it was held together by the assumption that I was too soft to check. Gene called me privately that afternoon. He was crying, not the performative kind, the kind where someone is trying to talk and their voice keeps failing and they have to start sentences over. He admitted Roy asked him to pose as a hospital administrator to confirm Helen's death if any family members called for verification. Gene said yes. He said yes because Roy told him Helen was dying anyway, that it was terminal, that this was just accelerating the paperwork. Gene believed him. Gene is 71 and trusts his brother because that's what he's done for 71 years. He gave me the script Roy wrote for him, written in Roy's handwriting on the back of an auto shop invoice. From the shop that's been closed for 2 years. County General Hospital, Patient Services, how may I direct your call? Roy wrote stage directions for a fake hospital receptionist on the back of an invoice from a dead business. I took a photo of it. I sent it to Sharon. Gene kept saying, "I didn't do it." I said yes, but I didn't do it yet. He said, "Yet," like it absolved him and condemned him at the same time. I told him I understood. I don't know if I do. But he was crying, and he gave me the script, and sometimes you take the evidence, and you let the person keep whatever's left of their dignity. Ramona made me a sandwich while I was on the phone with Gene. Turkey and Swiss. I ate half of it. The other half sat on the counter until it got warm, and I threw it away. I keep doing that. Starting sandwiches I don't finish. Here's something I found out later. 20 minutes before I sent the group text, while I was still sitting at the table writing in the notebook, Dina posted an Instagram story. Black screen. White text. RIP mom, with a heart emoji. 89 views before I screenshotted it. She mourned her living mother for Instagram sympathy while laughing about money on a phone call. She deleted it after the group text. But 89 people saw it. And screenshots, as Ramona keeps reminding me, are permanent. Dina also made one other mistake. She told Craig, her husband, about the $45,000. She framed it as an inheritance. Craig is an electrician who works 60-hour weeks and tracks every dollar because he grew up without much and doesn't plan to go back. When the group text landed and Craig did the math, he understood that his wife knew their mother-in-law was supposed to be dead and was laughing about a payout. He moved out that night, took a duffel bag, and went to his brother's house. Craig called me 2 days later. He was sitting in his brother's living room. I could hear a television in the background and what sounded like a kid arguing about cereal. Craig apologized to me, which was strange because Craig hadn't done anything. Then he called Helen. That call lasted 40 minutes. I don't know what they talked about. Helen didn't tell me, and I didn't ask. Then Craig hired a lawyer. In his divorce filing, which was thorough and cold in the way that only a deeply hurt man's legal documents can be, he included a text from Dina to Roy that said, "Just make sure my cut comes before taxes." He sent the filing to the family group chat. I watched the message arrive on my phone, and I watched the read receipts appear one by one like dominoes falling. Dina hasn't spoken to anyone in the family since. I don't know where she is. I don't think anyone does. Ramona checked Dina's Instagram once. The account is private now. The bio used to say, "Living my best life," with a palm tree emoji. Now it says nothing. Part of me feels something about that, and I'm not sure what it is. Not sympathy exactly. Something closer to the feeling of watching someone drive off a bridge they built themselves. And a small, quiet part of me, the part one really don't talk about, remembers that Dina was 7 years old once, and she used to follow me around the house asking me to read her books, and she called me E because she couldn't say Ethan. That girl and the woman who posted RIP mom on Instagram for likes are the same person. I keep trying to make those two fit together. They don't. Sharon, my lawyer, moved fast. She's the kind of woman who takes her glasses off when she's angry and puts them back on when she's about to make someone's life worse. She keeps a stress ball on her desk shaped like a gavel, and she was squeezing it so hard during our first meeting that her knuckles went white. She filed on 3 fronts simultaneously: criminal fraud complaint against Roy, forgery charges related to the will and the second mortgage, and a request to the insurance company's fraud division regarding the $250,000 policy. The death certificate investigation hit first. When the county clerk's office looked into Roy's application, they found Paulson, Wade's college roommate, had expedited the filing as a favor. When investigators showed up at Paulson's desk, he was eating a breakfast burrito. He put the burrito down. He answered 3 questions. Then he tried to delete the file from the system while the investigator was still in the room. The system logged the deletion attempt with a timestamp and user ID. Now Paulson was facing obstruction charges on top of everything else. He picked up the burrito again and didn't take a bite. Just held it. Helen's proof of life affidavit was already in the file. She'd beaten them to the system 3 weeks before they even tried to use it. My mother outmaneuvered a paralegal, a county clerk, and a 65-year-old con man with a Nokia and a trip to the health department. The insurance company didn't negotiate. They don't. That's not how they work when someone files a death claim on a person who is alive. A fraud investigator called Sharon within 48 hours of receiving the filing. A $250,000 death claim on a living person is the kind of thing that wakes up entire departments. Roy's policy was voided. His premiums were forfeit, and the investigation was referred to the state attorney general's office because insurance fraud at that dollar amount crosses a threshold that local courts don't handle. Roy wasn't just losing a case. He was gaining a file. Wade cracked on day 9. I think about that number sometimes. 9 days. That's how long loyalty lasted in my family when consequences showed up. When the notary board opened their investigation, when the county clerk investigation named him as a co-conspirator, when his firm's managing partner called him into a conference room that apparently smelled like old coffee and new consequences, Wade called me. Not to apologize. Not to explain. To cut a deal. He offered to testify against Roy in exchange for leniency on the notary fraud. He provided text messages, emails, and a recording he'd secretly made of Roy outlining the entire plan at a diner over a patty melt. Roy laying it all out between bites, talking about selling his wife's house like he was describing a weekend project. Wade traded his father for a reduced charge. Roy found out from his own lawyer. After the group text, after the legal filings, after Roy checked into a motel 40 minutes outside of town and stopped answering his phone, Helen and I went to the house. Ramona drove because my hands were doing the thing again. Helen sat in the back seat and didn't talk. She watched the road. I watched her in the mirror. She looked smaller in the back seat of our car than she ever looked in her own kitchen. The house was locked, but Helen had a key on a chain she'd been wearing around her neck under her cardigan. She'd been carrying the key to her own house like a secret for 6 months. The house smelled like dust and something stale, like old newspaper and microwave food and loneliness. The specific smell of a place where someone had been eating alone for a while and not opening windows. Roy's boots were by the door. His jacket was on the hook. The television remote was on the armrest of his recliner, right where he always left it. Everything looked normal. Normal is where the worst things hide. Helen went to the master bedroom closet. Behind winter coats, behind a box of Christmas decorations that hadn't been opened in 4 years, there was a safe. Roy's safe. The safe Roy didn't know Helen knew about. She opened it. Combination was her birthday. I don't know what that means, and I don't want to think about it too hard. Inside, $34,000 in cash, rubber banded in stacks. For watches Roy told Helen he'd sold. Helen's original jewelry, a pearl necklace and 2 rings that Roy reported stolen 2 years ago and collected insurance on. And a folder labeled after Helen. Inside the folder, the forged will, the fake death certificate draft, a handwritten timeline for selling the house, and a note that said, "Call appraiser after memorial service." After memorial service. He'd planned a memorial service for his living wife. He had a timeline for it. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. Call the appraiser after the memorial. Schedule closing before the end of the month. List furniture for estate sale. Like she was an item on a project plan. Like 34 years of marriage was a phase he was managing through to completion. I put the folder down. I walked to the bathroom. I ran the water. I don't know why. I didn't need to wash my hands. I just needed to hear water instead of the sound of nothing, which was the sound inside my head, which was the sound of a man reading his father's plan to sell his mother's life like surplus inventory. Helen picked up the pearl necklace. She held it for a while. She ran her thumb across the clasp the way you touch something you thought you'd never see again. She put it in her purse. She left everything else for Sharon to photograph and catalog. We locked the house. Ramona drove us home. Helen sat in the back seat again. She said one thing during the drive. She said, "I bought that necklace with my own money in 1994. It was the first nice thing I ever bought just for myself." Then she looked out the window and didn't say anything else. I watched the road and held Ramona's hand on the center console and tried to feel something specific, but all I felt was everything, all of it, at the same time, which is worse than any single feeling because at least a single feeling has a shape. 5 months. That's how long it took for everything to settle. 5 months of Thursdays at Sharon's office. 5 months of legal documents arriving in manila envelopes that I'd stack on the counter and open after the kids were asleep. Except I don't have kids yet. I just mean after the house was quiet, after Ramona was reading, after Helen was doing her crossword, because opening envelopes from lawyers feels like something you should do alone. 5 months of Helen living in our guest room, making coffee before anyone else was awake, doing crossword puzzles at the kitchen table every morning in the same chair, the one by the window, wearing the cardigan I bought her and sneakers that never quite matched whatever else she had on. 5 months of slowly understanding that the woman in my guest room wasn't a visitor. She was a refugee. From her own house. From her own marriage. From the man who sat in a parking lot for 2 years pretending he still worked somewhere. Ramona handled it better than I did. She handled everything better than I did. She made a schedule for dinners so Helen wouldn't feel like a burden. She bought a second crossword puzzle book because Helen finished the first one in 3 weeks. She didn't ask Helen to talk about it. She just made the house a place where Helen could exist without explaining herself. I asked Ramona once if she minded. She looked at me like I'd asked if she minded breathing. She said, "Your mother slept on a floor for 5 nights when you were 9. I can share a bathroom." Roy pleaded no contest to the fraud charges. His lawyer negotiated it down from what could have been 4 to 6 years. He got 18 months probation, a felony record, restitution payments he'll be making until he's 80, and a restraining order that means he can't come within 500 feet of Helen. He's living in a studio apartment above a laundromat in a town 40 minutes away. Jean told me. Jean is the only one who still talks to him. And even Jean spaces the calls out because he says Roy sounds the same as always, and that's the part that bothers him most. Wade lost his paralegal certification. The notary board revoked his stamp. His firm terminated him the same week. Walked him out with a box of personal items and a security escort, which is the professional equivalent of having your mother tell the neighborhood you're grounded. He cooperated with prosecutors, which kept him out of prison, but cooperation has a cost that doesn't show up in plea agreements. His name is in a public court filing next to the words co-conspirator and forged documents. Those words live on the internet now. They'll come up when anyone searches his name. He's working at a warehouse distribution center. Nights. He hasn't called Helen. He hasn't called me. He sent one text to the family group chat 6 weeks after everything settled. "I'm sorry for my part in this." 9 words. Nobody responded. The message sat there with a delivered receipt and no replies for 3 days before he left the group. I looked at those 9 words and I tried to find my brother in them. The brother who taught me to ride a bike when I was 6. The brother who was good once, before Roy made him an accomplice and the house made him a thief. I couldn't find him. Maybe he's still in there. Maybe 9 words isn't enough room. Paulson, the clerk, was fired and charged with obstruction. His deletion attempt was the thing that sealed it. If he'd just sat there and let the investigation happen, he might have gotten away with a reprimand. Instead, he panicked and pressed delete, and the system caught him. Sometimes the worst thing you can do is try to fix a mistake while someone is watching. Helen filed for divorce. It went through fast because Roy's lawyer knew fighting it would surface more evidence. The house, which was weeks from foreclosure when all of this started, was saved. Helen refinanced under her own name, using money from the safe that was hers to begin with. She kept the house. She changed the locks. She repainted the bedroom. She threw out Roy's recliner and replaced it with a reading chair she found at an estate sale for $40. She told me the chair sits better, and I think she meant more than the chair. I almost forgot. The dress. Dina had asked Roy for Helen's wedding dress from the house. Not for sentiment. She was going to alter it and wear it to her vow renewal next month. She was going to wear her living mother's wedding dress to a celebration while telling people Helen had passed peacefully. The fitting was scheduled for that Saturday, the Saturday after the phone call, the Saturday that never happened because I sent a group text, and the world Dina built on someone else's death collapsed before she could zip up the dress. I wasn't going to write this part, but Ramona said I should. And Ramona is usually right about the things I'm wrong about, which is most things. 1 year later, our daughter was born in March. We named her something that has nothing to do with any of this, because she deserves a name that's clean, a name that nobody will hear and think of a courtroom or a group text or a fake death certificate. Helen was in the delivery room. She held my hand while Ramona pushed, and her grip was stronger than I expected from a 64-year-old woman who does crossword puzzles for exercise. And she didn't say anything. She just held on, and her hand was warm and dry and steady. And I realized that the woman who built a 6-month escape plan on a $19 phone was the same woman who slept on the floor next to my couch when I was 9 and brought me soup in a thermos because thermoses made soup taste like an adventure. The same woman. Both versions. Both real. And she was here. She was alive. And the man who tried to make her not alive was sitting in a studio apartment above a laundromat 40 minutes away, and she was here, holding my hand, meeting her granddaughter. Last week, Ramona posted a photo on her private Instagram. Helen at the kitchen table. Same chair. Same mug. Holding our daughter. Caption: 3 generations. Same table. Dina saw it through a mutual friend screen. She called me for the first time in 11 months. 10 seconds of silence. Then she said, "I'm sorry about the dress." I said, "I know." She hung up. I walked back to the kitchen. Helen didn't look up from the baby. She didn't need to. She was already where she was supposed to be. 3 generations. Same table. Same mug. Helen's still there every morning. If that image means something to you, hit like. Subscribe for more. And if you know a Helen, call her. Don't wait for someone else to tell you she's gone.